and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Talent. This is the show where we get to sit down with some of the experts and we discuss a variety of topics around talent optimization. Now, today we have Drew Fortin, the SVP of Sales and Marketing here at the Predictive Index. Drew, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
No problem. Now, Drew, you've had quite a history with building teams, and one of the main things I've seen in that history is an emphasis on trust. This is why we mainly chose you for today's topic. It's all around building trust within teams. But before we dive into this, I want to gain a little bit of alignment because I'm sure that the meaning of trust might be different from person to person. So, Drew, how do you define trust when you're talking about teams?
Sure, I think that's a great question, and you're right. It's something I'm super passionate about. I'm known as kind of, I guess, an oversimplifier by a lot of folks that I work with, and I think trust is the root of pretty much everything when it comes to getting business done. And so when we think about teams, specifically trust, I think some people can liken it to that the soft, squishy stuff.
Mhm.
But really, when we're talking about trust, we're talking about the ability to appreciate and respect someone's opinion enough, in order for them to actually, or in order for you to actually be able to push them a little bit,
Right.
right? That's why we want trust. So there are actually two books that have been pivotal for me and my understanding of trust. One is Stephen Covey's The Speed of Trust, really good book. So in The Speed of Trust, Covey talks about judgment. And sometimes the intense pressure we put on ourselves to perform, we can place that judgment on someone else. And that judgment casts and turns into casting skepticism, doubt, all those other things on people. That means that we don't trust each other and we can't get along. The other book, which is which has a really cool, highly engaging framework, is Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and he presents it in a triangle of how to get results. The bottom of the triangle talks about trust, and if you can't have trust, then you can't have conflict. If you can't have conflict, then you can't have true commitment. If you can't have commitment, then you can't have accountability, then you can't have results. Ultimately, if we trust each other, we can fight it out, and we're going to know that we're going to be okay after, and that's really what trust is about.
Right. That makes sense. And that also alludes to one of my questions was, why does it really matter? What is trust going to do for your team? And it seems like you're already touching upon those points, but do you want to elaborate a little bit more of if someone asked you today, you know, why does trust matter? Why should I
Sure.
really care about this? What would you say?
I would say that trust is the one thing you need to successfully accomplish anything as a team. And people say, 1 plus 1 equals 3. A team is really a gestalt, right? That is, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So we really have to make sure that that trust is there, because that's the X factor. Everything else, it doesn't matter, right? And if we
Right.
have the trust, then I can be like, great, Josh, I'm here in my basement. You're wherever you are in the learning center.
The learning center.
And right. And when we leave today and we're like, we're both going to work on this project, I'm going to trust that you're going to get something done. You're going to trust that I'm going to get something done. And we're going to set expectations with each other. If you don't have that, you end up with like superficial, just like, well, that's great. Oh, okay, we'll follow up tomorrow and we'll see what happens. And that's not trust.
Right. Right. So that's a great point because, you know, great. We know it matters. What comes next? How do you get others to see that importance of building trust in the relationships? How do you get others to understand that we need to take it a step further of just the nicety of having, trust between each other, but
Yeah.
actually doing something with that?
Yes. I think it's a great question. And first off, this nicety usually is not trust. Being friendly with each other is not trust. Asking how someone's weekend was is not trust.
Right.
That's being friendly, and that's okay, because that's typically how we build trust, right?
Mhm.
Now, one of the things that you can do, and it's a great leadership characteristic anyways, is to be vulnerable, right? Vulnerability creates trust. If I'm going to be vulnerable, then you're more likely to be vulnerable too, Josh. And if you look at my background, a bit of vulnerability here is myself. I'm a maverick behavioral pattern. I like to
Mhm.
take risks, right? I'm a driving person. At the same time, I don't pay a ton of attention to the details and the structure of things. And people should be able to call me out on that, right?
Right.
Also, in order to build trust, is the importance in a team setting to deliver feedback and actually be open to receiving feedback.
Mhm.
Human beings, right? We love to judge, we love to give our opinion, but sometimes when that opinion is being cast on you and your own personality, you're very reluctant because our egos are super strong to apply that pressure back. But if
Right.
I open up and I say, Josh, that was great feedback. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to try to do that. You're right. I probably did come off that way. We're establishing trust on a personal level. And that's absolutely what's needed to get true business done.
Right. And that makes it hard too, right? Because those examples are more in the moment things. It's not exact, like, here's step one, step two of how to build that trust. It's not always a concrete, you just follow these steps and you get that trust. So what do you do to make sure that you are taking those right steps to get to those
Sure.
scenarios?
It's a great question. I would say step one, it starts all with communication. And any form of building trust or getting a team to work better together
Mhm.
takes being deliberate. You need to be deliberate. You need to tell your team, hey, we need to build trust. One of the things that I did with my team here at PI early on is I took that framework from Patrick Lencioni and we created a trust triangle. And every meeting for over a year, we would kick off the meeting with the ceremony of calling someone in the room and having them drawing the trust triangle and explaining each one of those levels: trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, results. And they would walk through in their own words what it meant. But what
Mhm.
it did is it was always on the board behind us. So when something happened, we could turn around and we could be like, hey, on the whiteboard, you see that trust triangle? This is happening right now. We need to work this out. Conflict is okay, right?
Mhm. Right.
Healthy conflict is needed to move things forward. So that's another thing that you can do. The other thing that you can do, as you said, like that feedback is in the moment. Well, practicing giving that feedback is not in the moment.
Hmm.
You actually have to be deliberate about, hey, team, we need to do an effort together where we are going to practice giving each other feedback. We're going to practice being vulnerable, right? These are great things you can do to open up a team stand up every day. Or to open up a team meeting is pair people together who haven't known each other and be like, interview each other and introduce yourself to the group, right?
Right.
Those things people look at as like, these are like trust falls, icebreaker activities.
Mhm.
They actually do help, crack open a little bit that trust so we can actually start to build those relationships and rapport needed to truly trust each other.
Right. I think that makes sense, and I think that's something that a lot of people they overlook because just like you said, it's that, "Oh, it's that icebreaker thing. I don't wanna actually do that." But there's a lot of value underneath that that you really need to bubble up, and I think that's one of the biggest struggles as a leader is you need to show and find a way to connect with those individuals to say like, "No, this is important." What does that dialogue look like? Is it just and I assume some managers will take the approach of just saying, "This is what we're doing, and this is what you have to do." But what has it been like in your experience of trying to push that importance?
Lead by example. I think that if you practice it and you're deliberate about it, now myself, I'm more of an influential person,
Mhm.
and an influential, persuasive leader. I'm gonna get people motivated towards my goal versus
Right.
showing them a ton of data specs and things for them to realize, oh, this is a good idea. So because of my natural style, it would be, let's be the best team we can be. Let's show them that this process works.
Mhm.
And so I would be more likely to actually use my own team as like the petri dish
Yeah.
to show that it's working. Now, other leaders may want to take a different approach, and I think that's okay. There are so many tools and solutions out there that allow you to do, in the moment pulse engagement surveys, and there's this thing called Menti that we use at PI all the time, and do like a Menti poll to get anonymous feedback and things of that nature, where you can
Mhm.
like objectify, quantify, use data to in an attempt to build that trust and show that you're listening and you're taking people's feedback and they're taking your feedback.
I think that totally makes sense. Those are great examples. Let's take it a step back though. So obviously we're talking about this idea of building that trust, of putting all these things in place. But in general, a lot of people, I would assume, realize that they need that trust to be cohesive. If I was to say that I was on a team, I would generally feel like, yeah, we have to trust each other, we have to get along, we have to be on the same page. So why do you think that mistrust even comes up? Because it seems like it's obvious that we shouldn't have these issues, right?
Yep. The opposite of trust is suspicion. If we are suspect of something, it means we
Hmm.
don't trust the process or we don't trust the people involved. I think we assume way too much that trust has been established. And I think even once trust is established, we may learn to take it for granted. So by not placing a focus on it consistently, by not making sure it's on your own personal development and on your others' personal development. And if you're a leader of a team, it better be part of your strategy. How do I maintain and what are the things I can do regularly to build, measure, establish trust?
Hmm.
Super, super important.
That is a great point. And it comes to my next question, which is how do you assess whether you've established that trust? How do you know that you've hit the mark? And obviously this is a growing thing where you need to constantly be building that trust. But how do you know when you have that trust, when your team actually feels that?
So I mentioned pulse surveys or engagement surveys. I think an
Mhm.
engagement survey is a really great way to understand on a periodic basis, let's say every few months, to see if you're moving the needle from a trust standpoint.
Mhm.
Um, in an engagement survey, you may be able to put a question in like, I feel like my ideas are heard and that I'm listened to,
Mhm.
or I feel like I have a good idea about where the company's going, or I have confidence in where the company's going. So I think engagement surveys are definitely a way to go about it. Another way to go about measuring it is on it every 12 weeks, for instance, I do what I call a skip level meeting.
Mm.
So I manage a department here at PI, the sales and marketing department, and I have 3 direct reports, right? But there's 30 odd people on the team.
Right.
So what I do is a skip level meeting, and it's past that level of people. I randomly assemble people, and every 12 weeks, I get the same group of 4 or 5 people on the team together, and we're building trust and cohesion in this unit. And I talk to a different group every Friday,
Hmm.
right? Now, what that allows me to do is I do the least amount of talking, and I just say, so tell me what's happening. How confident are you? We have a list of questions, and people just start talking. And that gives me a good idea into, well, what's their focus? What are they working on? What are their concerns?
Mhm.
And that's very much a qualitative measure, but I would
Right.
say it's just as important as these periodic engagement surveys.
Wow, that's a good idea. So when we're actually hiring these people or bringing people on,
Mhm.
there is that establishment of you need to find the right person for the seat. And I don't want to say that there is, but I just kind of want to get your opinion on this. But do you think there's a better type of person or qualities that you should look for that will equate to someone who is better equipped to trust one another or is going to be a better fit for
Sure.
that team?
I think it's a fantastic question. And in typical like sales nature, I'm going to say, well, it depends. But
Right.
I think it depends in that if you think about people's natural behaviors or tendencies, Josh, and how that matches to the culture of an organization.
Hmm.
So you take a company like the Predictive Index, we have a very kind of exploring macro culture behavior, if you will. We like to be agile, nimble, innovative.
Right.
And what that leads to is a lot of side conversations and meetings and talking things through and ideating. Well, for somebody that doesn't have a high level of extroversion, who's just coming into the culture,
Hmm.
they're going to be like, wow, I just had a meeting. I need to go back and process. Well, by the time that they went back to process and brought something back, what's happened? The conversations kept evolving and they're like, oh my God. And then they start to be like, are these people, what's happening? Is this me? Is this them? And immediately we start to be suspect. Why did they undermine me because I was out doing this and they did that? Well, it's like, well, our culture is just, we move things forward.
Right.
Take the complete opposite. You put me in a very high structure rules, process-oriented organization, people are likely more going to have lower levels of extroversion, and they're not going to be like, let's just talk things through all the time. They're going to be like, you do your stuff, I do my stuff. We talk once in a while. We come together when we have questions and our stuff crosses over.
Right.
Well, in those situations, if they saw me bouncing around talking to everybody, they're like, what are you doing? Running a political campaign? Like, right? As I said, the opposite of trust is suspicion.
Right.
That creates the suspicion. So you need to take that head on. You need to be like, you're right. Your behavior is different than the norm. And this is why. And you play a role just as much as we play a role. So let's talk about it. Right. And I realize this whole time as I'm telling you, not only am I a passionate person, but you can probably see some of the, what people might refer to as like assertive, combative nature a bit.
Yes.
Right. Like that takes trust in order to be yourself around someone. So establishing that early on is important. And then maintaining that is really important too.
Yeah. And I think it also plays into how important it is to have not only yourself, but also your team to be aware of self-awareness because of the fact that there are multiple personalities and multiple types. The fact that you might come off to some people as that very passionate or assertive doesn't mean you're necessarily trying to take over. It means you're just enthusiastic and want to be a part of the team.
That's 100% right. And so another kind of like, I guess you could say tip or a thing that I've learned is terms and conditions, right?
Okay.
So realizing that to maintain trust from a certain standpoint, we have some of us maybe at higher levels in an organization. Some of us have might have more authority because of how close we are to a specific project or part of the organization that we're making change in. Mm-hmm. And because of that, when we deliver opinions or we make statements, we have the opportunity to bring people together and make trust stronger, or we have the ability to crack that foundation of trust. And we need to surround things, as I say, in terms and conditions. So, hey, Josh, I had this thought. Now, it could just be me, and I'm known to be a bit hyperbolic, and I may jump 3 steps ahead when I don't have all the information. The story I'm kind of telling myself is, X, Y, and Z. Like, How does that resonate with you? I realize I could be completely off base, right? By doing all the terms and conditions and sharing my opinion, you're less likely to be like, whoa, Drew said this, and therefore I probably need to go make a change. And then it like creates this whole storm, right? So,
right.
Sorry to swear in your show.
That's okay. I think people will they'll be okay with it. Maybe we'll put a censor on it. It'll be fine. But that goes into my last question. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do want to talk about that cracking that foundation or ruining that trust, because we've talked a little bit about it in this conversation, but in my experience, there's still so many things that can break that trust among the different teams. What are those steps or actions? And, we talked about the survey and keeping and measuring and making sure, but what are those actions that you should be taking as a leader to ensure that this trust remains healthy and that your team is improving as opposed to staying stagnant?
Sure. I would say first and foremost, it starts with the understanding that you can never assume that trust is there. Second is being deliberate and upfront about it, which is just saying it. Do we have trust, right? I'm sensing there's tension in the room, right? Is that because we're not trusting each other? What do we have to do? Just addressing it is really important. Right. And then I would say communication. And it's not just like me communicating one-on-one with you, but I think leaders and managers of teams really need to think about, how do I communicate to my team what we're going to be doing over the next 12 months? How do we check in periodically about that? When is going to be the opportunity for them? And I'll make sure it's clear that they can give input and then a decision can be made. When we do daily stand-ups or we do weekly meetings, what are we going to do? People call it like that. How do we make things fun? That's really the ongoing, like, how do we build trust? How do we make sure that we all realize, behind the facade, behind my background, I'm actually here in my basement. I'm a person. I have kids. I have a family. What's going on? Right. The more that you know each other on the personal level, the more you can be empathetic and the more you can actually trust in each other, and having kind of, I would say, that macro level. What is our plan? What are we doing? Cadences of when things should happen. Getting organized about it helps so much, and telling your team what that organization is also helps. Hey, we are doing this to build trust. It's totally okay to say it.
Right. Well, Drew, thank you so much for joining me today. I knew that I could trust, but that you would be
Love
an
it.
amazing guest. Thank you. Thanks for sharing your knowledge.
Josh, thanks so much. It was a pleasure.